Good morning. For this last video that I'm going to do, I'm hoping the audio will be better. And we're going to work at the scraping out of rocks and or bushes. This specific demo will be for rocks, but if you wanted to do bushes, you could incorporate a perylene green or mix a green with your phthalo blue and some raw sienna. So I put down a color tint first and let it dry. This is raw sienna. I painted it wet on dry. And for the rocks, I want you to use fresh, thick paint. This works best because it's easier for the credit card or store card to move the paint because it's thick. It sits on top of the paper longer. So I'm going to be using burnt sienna, burnt umber, and actually indigo this time. You can use Prussian blue if you want. Or if you don't have these colors or one of the colors, you could use something that has a wide value range going to the deeper value. So the painting of the thick colors will be wet on dry. Well, hi there. We're going to work today on scraping out rocks. And I have done my light tint of raw sienna. I'm using the medium hockey brush. This is my, we'll call it the credit card, but it's a Mammoth card. I would use this edge. I have squeezed out fresh burnt sienna. You don't have to use Schmenke. You can use Winsor Newton or Daniel Smith. And I also have squeezed out fresh burnt umber. And I have fresh indigo on my palette. So since we don't want the paint to run in this instance, I'm having my paper flat. I'm fully wetting my brush a couple times. I do tap it off slightly on the edge of my on my water bucket. I'm going to start with my lighter color. I'm putting the tips of the brush right into this nice thick paint. I want thick paint, not clumpy. I see a clump right now. I'm trying to get that out. On my bristles. Okay. So I'm just going to do one up here so you can kind of see. I'm going to paint it a little bit like that. And while it's still shiny wet, thinking that the top will have light on it, I just went in and scraped out the rock. And let's put another one in. I did clean the edge of my card on my paper towel, and I'm going to go in and scrape out another rock. Now, one thing that you could do, I'm going to go into my burnt umber real quick. Same goopy texture, is you can go in and put in a little bit of a shadow just to set that rock down a little bit. And if you want, you can take a slightly clean, damp brush, and I'm just going to soften this line up a little bit. And if you wanted to soften that up a little bit, you could do that too. Okay, so I'm gonna keep the same burnt umber on my brush. I'm going back into my burnt sienna. Oh, there's a nice clump. Okay, I'm checking for any loose hairs, maybe. No, okay, just a long one. Okay, so let's, maybe I'll go the other way. See how thick that paint is. The goal is to keep the paint really thick, because that's what helps with your credit card moving across it. So let's say that the light's coming from the other way. So there you go. There's another rock. And let's paint a third one, and I'm just going into my burnt umber again. And let's, okay, I went a little wild up there. So you probably do want to kind of cover up any of your dry brush strokes if you kind of get it in there. Going back into my burnt umber. And yeah, you can leave a couple areas that aren't painted if you're going in painting below. So this is still nice and shiny. I'm using the clean edge of my credit card again. Washed, cleaned it out. Quick scrumble or drying on the towel. There's 2 rocks. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do is I am going to clean up my brush pretty quick, as I had showed you before. Doesn't have to be totally clean, but the thought process here is one side of your brush is going to have clear water. The other side will have thick, goopy paint. So that's the idea. Clear water, goopy paint. And you'll see how this makes it a little bit different. So once again, I've gone in, my brush is super saturated. I'm just going to be conscious that I'm going to have this side to have the paint. And I'm going in and getting those bristles into nice fresh paint. And that didn't really work. Okay, so I did end up separating my brush a little bit so you can see here's the paint and here's the water. Okay. I like the clear water because it does allow you to pull down a little bit of variety in your tone. So here we go. I'm scraping. Cleaning, drying. And here we go again. I was going to go in. Voila. Okay, so now I'm going to clean this a little bit more. And I think for you folks, what we'll do is we'll try to separate the brush a little bit, just so you're not distracted. So 2/3 of the brush will have color and 1/3 will have clear water. So I'm putting that 1/3 back in the water so it's nice and moist. And then I'm picking up burnt umber and I'm getting it nice and thick on the brush. And so you can just go in and kind of dab in a little bit of variety if you want with that clear water. It pulls the paint down nice. let's go in and do this. That. And you might want to take your towel. You could blot up a little bit of this color that's flooding in. And you're pretty much done with your rocks. Later, if you want, you can come in with one of your rounds, because this is fairly dry, with some, I wet the brush first. You could just create a couple little lines if you wanted, or you can bring this down, or you can even do some dry brush on it to create some lights and darks, and you could go back in, wet your brush, and soften some of that if you wanted. So that's a couple other things, like if you wanted to set that burnt sienna rock down a little bit more in the background, I just have some burnt sienna and burnt umber on my brush, and see how I could make this a little uneven. A little bit of dry brush to set that back so it's not quite as interesting. And clean up my brush. A little clear water. It's just slightly damp, and I'm just touching in certain areas to get the paint to move a little bit. So here you are. Of the bristles, whereas the other side is lighter. Just for a different way of looking at this. So I'm just, see, now I'm going in with the watery side and putting in a lighter little wash in there, maybe blending out the colors a little bit, back and forth. Look at that. Look how nice that is. Then I'm going to do the same with the burnt umber, and you got to go pretty fast. So here's the burnt umber going in on one side, thinking that the bottom of the rocks would be a little darker, and you can, there's the watery side of the brush. And then I didn't clean my indigo, but I'm just gonna, let's see, I'll just give it a quick rinse, a quick dry, and back in on one side, so you can actually see it split like that. And then I'm just gonna go in and now for the card. Okay. Let's see what's going on here. So you can see just by bringing your card straight across, you can make a shape. Bringing your card up and over makes a nice rock shape. Just bringing your card, here we go, a little diagonal. And we're done.